Hello, my lovelies. Jenny O here, the author with no last name, and today I'm putting my reader hat on, and I really want to talk about something that has been bugging me. So, I recently moved. Okay, recent as in July, and I know it's the end of November, but it still feels recent. I recently moved, and now my library is just down the street. Quick walk. And I have been trying my best to catch up on a bunch of science fiction and fantasy books I haven't been able to read because my library was, 20 minutes away by bus, and plus, you had to wait for the next bus, and so on and so forth. So I've been actually returning a lot of these books not finished, which makes it really hard to do more book reviews because it's going to be did not finish, did not finish, did not finish. You don't want to hear that, really. And I have some just thoughts about why I am in particular not finishing these books, even though they're quote-unquote New York Times bestsellers, yada yada yada. And it's really beginning to aggravate me, and there is a reason why I, in general, do not like books that are quote-unquote too long. Now, I have read books that are quote-unquote too long by my standards, which we'll get to in a minute, and enjoyed them. It's just I'm seeing the same problems over and over in these books, and I kind of want to talk about it from a reader standpoint, editorial standpoint, but because I don't want us to sound like sour grapes, I do have other reasons for it. So let's dive into it. Okay, first things first, page numbers are meaningless. If you are in fan fiction, or if you've ever tried to query a book, you will understand that word count is more important than page count, because formatting. Formatting is a major deal. So once again, like in my Anybody Can Write a Book video, I want to talk about debut author word count. So in young adults, word count is 50,000 words, or 200 pages at 250 words per page. An adult is 80,000 words at 320 pages at 250 words per page. And if you go look at websites and they're like, oh, we're going to estimate the amount of words in the book, all of them are using 250 words a page. So what formatting does is it can change drastically how many pages are in your book and how many words are on your page. So formatting depends on your page size, whether you're doing a mass market 5x7 or if you're doing a trade 6x9. It will also depend on your font size. A 10-point font and a 12-point font are extremely different sizings depending on your font. Your font kerning can also change how many words per page and how many pages there are. Kerning is the space between the letters. So if you have small spaces between the letters, you can fit more words on a page. Large spaces, less words. And kerning makes a big difference if you're, say, dyslexic. Page spacing. Single space, 1.5 space, double space, that's going to change a lot of how much white space there is on the page and how many pages there are in the book. Margin sizes, a 1-inch margin versus a 1/2-inch margin, going to change how many pages you've got. And where your chapter starts. Usually in most books, your chapter will start either a third of the way or halfway down the page, but I have recently seen some books where the chapter is starting at the top of the page. Very confusing. So all this put together can really change how many pages your book is going to be and how many words are on the page. So an adult average length book, in my opinion, is 120,000 K to 165 K, which means that somewhere between 300 to 400 pages at 250 to 300 words per page. Some authors, as an example of this, Brian Jakes, Mercedes Lackey, most Jim Butcher's books, Ian McCaffrey, those books tend to range between 120 to 165K. Okay, now too long books, in my opinion, which is over 165K. I have seen upwards of 300,000 words. They are 500 plus pages long, or I've seen even 1,000 pages. So they'll do like in 1,000, an 800 page hardcover, and then they'll want to do a mass market, and it ends up being over 1,000 pages, so they have to split it up into 2 books, and or they'll do it as a trade paperback, which is similar size to a hardcover. So it will end up being 400 to 450 words per page, and this is becoming increasingly more and more and more common in science fiction and fantasy. And it's kind of driving me crazy. So, before you're going, Jenny, you're a hypocrite. Okay. Yes, I'm a hypocrite. The Lone Prospect is too long, and I know this. It's around 174 to 175,000 words, and it has 400 words per page on the average at 448 pages. So, I finished the draft of The Lone Prospect, I went directly to Rodeo's Run, and then Rodeo's Run, the sequel, was the same length. And I really, really wanted a professional edit, because I knew it was too long. I knew it needed somewhere between 10,000 to 50,000 words removed somehow. But I wasn't sure where to do so and keep the story I wanted to tell, and the person that told me it's too long, you need to get it down to 80,000 words, meant cutting out what made my book in the first place. 10,000 to 50,000 words, I could understand. 80,000, 95,000 words, that becomes a real issue when my story is, slice of life, found family type of stuff, guy deciding whether or not he wants to go or stay, blah, blah, blah. My story didn't fit genre conventions, so that's another reason why it wasn't traditionally published. And with Rodeo's Run being the same length, I was just, after getting all these rejections, and I was just like, look, I am happy with the story as it is. I had some sort of indication that maybe it would sell as an indie, so I went indie. I'm proud of the book. I'm okay with it being 175,000 words, but it's indie. Indie is like an entirely different minefield than a traditionally published book. It's print on demand. I only get, X amount of money off of the royalties. Buy the ebook, send me more money, buy the ebook type of thing. I do paperback books because I know there are people who like having a paperback in their hands. I do that as a service, not to make money. And I also know my style is more like fan fiction oriented too, kind of. So, and I know there's a lot of long fan fiction style readers who, if I could get them interested in my book, wouldn't mind that it's 175,000 pages. So I have 5 reasons why I don't like too long books. Reader intimidation, debut author expectations, print costs and consistency issues, editing issues, and big books being pushed by big-name authors to publishers. Alright, before we dive into the reasons, let's just be clear, this is not a new phenomenon. Okay, there have been long books, too long books, for a very, very long time, and book length really did fluctuate over time. And so we have to talk about the here and now, as in, the last 10 years of what is acceptable to debut authors versus, what was acceptable 50, 60, 70 years ago. Okay, so Dune is 494 pages, and that's using my hardcover. The Green Rider is 500 pages. That was in every single book by Kristen Britton after that got longer. Crucial's Dart, which I really enjoy. It's 899 pages in mass paperback. The Sword of Shannara, which I got through exactly once, is 726 pages. George R. Martin's first book, A Game of Thrones, was 807 pages in mass paperback. A Discovery of Witches is 579 pages in trade, and I'm pretty sure that had 450 words per page. James S.A. Corey's Leviathan Wakes was 577 pages at 450 words per page. That's in trade paperback. The City of Brass was 532 pages, and The Priory of the Orange Tree is 848 pages in hardcover. Like I said, this is becoming more of a norm in science fiction and fantasy rather than the exception. I went to Reddit because I was trying to find word counts, because traditional publishers do not put out the word counts. I was trying to find word counts, and I went to Reddit, and they had from a couple years ago, they had an R Fantasy post about word counts of fantasy books. And so many of those books were over 165,000 words, and finding books that were 80,000 words or 120,000 words were on that particular list, which was not exhaustive. It was a lot more difficult than you'd think. Okay, so writers who are like Jim Butcher and Patty Briggs are kind of the exception here instead of the rule, though I do notice a lot of urban fantasy authors in particular do keep to that 120,000 and under word count. Maybe it's just part of the genre, I don't know. But epic fantasy, you're starting to get tomes. So my biggest reason why this aggravates me so much is reader intimidation, okay? Really big, thick books intimidate readers. They look at them and it's just too much of an emotional investment for them to want to reach out and pick that book off the shelf. Most readers, not readers like me who are voracious or romance readers, most readers pick up a book when they are tired and sick. So they have a set amount of time to be able to read that book. They have a set amount of energy and emotional investment, and a really big, thick book is going to intimidate them. This is also a big problem in young adult right now. Say Children of Blood and Bone, that was somewhere around 140,000 words, which is almost 3 times as long as a young adult novel should be. And it's, when I was reading what is now considered middle grade young adult, I was reading Brian Jakes, which, 120,000 words. Most of my friends, if they didn't have people reading the books to them, like my really awesome 3rd grade teacher, Mr. Fillmore, they were sticking with what would be considered pulp fiction. So, Goosebumps, Sweet Valley Twins, The Babysitter's Club, now Warrior Cats, even though some Warrior Cats books got a lot longer than that. Just books that were 40,000, 50,000 words. The first Harry Potter is 70,000 words, and even that was a little too thick for a middle grade young adult novel. What made up for it was J.K. Rowling's really easy to read writing style and the just whimsical, fantastical world that drew you into reading the book. So kids, while they might have been kind of intimidated by the length, they were still willing to read it. And then, they progressively got a little longer and a little longer. And by the time you reach Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which is, pull this off, 754 pages long, and it has looks like it has a single spacing and 11-point font with 3/4 inch margins. They were so invested in that world of Harry Potter that they were willing to pick up the book and read it. Okay, you had to get them hooked into the world before you gave them a close to 800-page book. Okay, so all these really big books by these really big name authors who want to put out, want to write these epic things, unless they have something earlier in, from them that you trust them to be able to write a good story that's shorter, and some of them do and some of them don't, you're not going to grab readers who are willing to start on your world because just the book is too big and they're like, I don't have time for that. And here's where fanfiction has the advantage, because when you're online on AO3 and you're looking at fanfiction and you're seeing the word count, it doesn't translate to you to a page count. So, okay, here's a 2,000-page word story that looks cute. Oh, here's a 365,000 word story that it looks, I like the concept of it. So, I'm going to read that, and next thing you know, it's 12 hours later and you're coming out and you're dazed and confused. You're not thinking about how many pages it is. So that's where fanfiction has the advantage. The next thing is, this is really putting a number on debut author expectations. Okay? So, a lot of times, when these authors are writing two big books, 165K plus words, it means it's their third, fourth, fifth book. They have made it past the author average of 3 books, and now the publisher thinks, oh, you have enough people buying your books, we are willing to fudge the printing costs, and you can now write a book, not as long as you want, but a longer book. And this really confuses first-time authors. First-time authors, there's no written rules out there for first-time authors because, publishing houses are like, oh, we'll make the exception if it's really, really great. Well, in my experience, most authors do not understand what really, really great means, genius level worth of writing. So they have their too big, too long books, like me, and, they want to get a publishing contract. So they're querying, and, there are some agents who are like, don't put your word count in because that's not, that's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. Don't let them know that. Just put the first 5, tell them the first 5 pages and, add it. But most agents, in my experience, they will ask for the word count. They want the word count because they want to spend the least amount of time on a debut book to pitch it to an editor and have the editor pitch it to the publisher. So they want your book to be as polished as possible before you query them, and they want it within, if you're a young adult, 50,000 words, or if you're adult, 80,000 words. And some people are like, well, science fiction and fantasy, you can get 110,000 words. honest to God, you can always add 30,000 words if you need to. Get it down to that 80,000 words just to hedge your bets. So you go to the science fiction and fantasy section, you go and you see all these books, and you see all these really, really big books, or, it's not even science fiction, just science fiction and fantasy anymore, but you go and you see all these really big books, and they get it into their heads that they can write any book of length they want, because there's just no seeming rules for them. And you're like, well, Ginny, the story takes as long as it takes, and it's yes and no. We'll get there in a minute. Okay, so debut authors need to understand that there is a set kind of printing cost and a set length for these books, and by just putting out all these super long books, especially if you're using multiple pen names, so they can't tell that you put out 3 or 4 books before, it's giving them the wrong message. So the excuse, most of the time, that publishers give to debut authors is that they are only doing 80,000 words because of quote-unquote print costs, and this drives me crazy. And it's just, for me, it's a consistency issue. So if you have printing cost considerations for a debut author, why in the world do you not have printing cost considerations for the established author? They are willing to quote-unquote fudge the printing cost considerations. And what printing cost is are you doing hardback or softcover? How many, the formatting issues, how many pages it is, that type of thing. It's just physical cost of printing the book, how much ink are you using, and so on and so forth. So they'll tell debut authors, oh, you have to cut so many words from your book because print cost. And I did a review of a book, and I said, this book needs 10,000 more words to feel authentic. And not a week or 2 after I posted that review, and I know it was not anything to do with my review. Maybe she got multiple reviews to say that. And she posted that, she's working either on the final draft of the 2nd book, which is coming out in March, or she's working on the first draft of the 3rd book. I don't know. But she had to cut scenes from the 1st book because of print costs. They told her, it would cost too much too many pennies to print more, to give you more words. And because she was a debut author and she did not have a New York Times bestseller at the time, she could not push back. She didn't have power to push back and go, my story, in order to feel authentic, needs that 10,000, 20,000 words. It needs those scenes. What can I do? How do you want to negotiate so I can keep the things in my book that the book needs from a character standpoint, and then in returns for this print cost nonsense? I mean, it's really difficult for me to go and read a book that, to me, is a 4-star book and could have been a 5-star book if those character interaction scenes had been kept, and then see in the same store, in pretty much the same type of section, that this 800-page book got printed. What in the world is going on here? And the only difference is this one author, who only needed 10,000 more words, was a debut author, and this other author had 3 or 4 books published already and was quote-unquote an established author. Please, we just need some consistency in our lives. If you're going to use print costs as an excuse, then don't don't say you're with this established author, oh, we'll fudge it so you can have your really super long book because, you know, we'll fudge the print costs. They're shoving the print costs of the established author onto the debut author, and it's just not kosher. Next, I'm putting on my editor hat. So I've been reading these books, and I am beginning to see a very consistent issue that is going to turn off a lot of readers. And if your idea is still having this consistent issue on too long books is a big problem, because you're going to have too many people who go to the library, pick it up, read it, go, ugh, I'm bored out of my mind, set it down, and then not go to the bookstore and purchase it. Or they're going to start reading the first 5 chapters, look inside on Amazon, you know, whatever 10-15% there is. And they're just going to, by the way, that's a really important thing to do. They're just not going to get invested or hooked into it, and they're not going to buy it. So the biggest issue I have seen in reading these books that I am literally not finishing, and they're long books and they're fantasy books, and it's just like, you know, to an extent, I love epic fantasy. I like the idea of, you know, big worlds, and, you know, I'm the one who read Tolkien 3 times before I graduated. So, actually 4, because if that time we read it in the senior class counted. So, you know, it's just, the story is not starting promptly. What happened in the old epic fantasies is you got to this story right away. And what I'm seeing over and over and over and over again is the story is not starting within the first 50,000 to 80,000 words. Yes, I just did that deliberately, because those are the exact same amount of words debut authors get. Established authors are not getting their story up and off the ground and going in the same amount of words that other authors have to do an entire story into. And one of these books made me so angry. And I have not been angry at a book in years. I mean, I just got so angry, I shut the book and I was just like, nothing is happening. She's dithering about what's happening. I just don't have time for this. Most people do not have time to wait for your story to start over halfway or even at the end of the book. So, where is the editors? I know where the editors are. They're not in traditional publishing anymore. And it's just, these books, in my opinion, if they want a broader audience to sell more books, which is the goal of, you know, traditional publishing, they needed to be edited so that the story would start within the first couple chapters, especially in epic fantasy. You know, like Tolkien. He got the story started within the first couple chapters. And some of these books, I'm reading and I'm reading and I'm reading and I'm seeing exposition. You're telling me stuff. I don't know what this is important or not, and I'm not going to remember it. Can we please get on to the point where the character starts the actual story and, you know, things aren't contrived convenience? So, and as a development editor, this is one of those particular, oh my God, help me, things that as a analytical reader just drives me up to the wall. And lastly, I think this is the last point. So I don't know how many people go and read either the Wikipedia articles or the author's notes at the end of the book. But I've been noticing, especially recently, in some of these books that I've been opening, and I'll like, get as far as I can, check the ending, be really confused by the ending, and then I'll skim the author's notes. And I've noticed a trend that a lot of these too long books are being pushed by big name authors to publishers. Like, because they're established authors, they now have other established author friends. They've gone to conventions, they've met all the other authors, blah, blah, blah. They're now in writing groups with big name authors, and so they get, they're like, I am writing this really big book, this really epic thing, and all their big name author friends are excited about it, and of course, you got big name author friends, so they're going to talk about it with their agents and their publisher, and oh, my friend is writing this really big book, and it's really cool, and it's going to be the next big thing, and you're continue extrapolating. This is how networking works. And my thing is that big name authors, well, they might, write epic stuff themselves or like epic stuff. They actually might not be your target readers. And because a lot of their books might have the same issues, or the books aren't being edited enough because you have those big name authors in your circle or in your writing group to be like really hyping up this book that, if it had been given to a more regular reader, would have been like, are you going to get to the point anytime soon, please? This is not important. Please cut. I hate to tell you this, but going to school and going to the library is rather boring and dull and does not make for a good story. Maybe we should get to the part where we're making the good story. So, just things like that. And, I mean, yay, good for them. They have big name authors in their reading and writing groups, and I'm happy that they have made these really great friendships. At the same time, you still need like this beta reading group of people who aren't big name authors, who aren't necessarily always epic fantasy fans too, because epic fantasy has wandered into this let's not get to the point for over 300 pages or 2 or 3 books kind of trajectory. And, a more average reader to go, let's get to the point of the story, let's get the story going. So, summing up again, my 5 reasons are reader intimidation. Readers just do not have the emotional investment most of the time to pick up a really thick book right off the bat. You need to start with smaller books, and work your way up to that big book so they're first emotionally invested, especially if you're doing a series. Debut author expectations. This is really messing with debut authors and what they think is allowable when they query. They don't realize the rules for established authors are different than the rules of debut authors, and it's really, really hard to hammer it into their heads because a lot of debut authors, including myself, can be really, really stubborn. Print cost and consistency issues. So they're using this excuse of print costs to tell debut authors we can't, do a bigger book. And then they allow established authors to do bigger books, and it's like they're shoving the print costs of the bigger books onto the debut authors. It's just be consistent. If you're going to use that excuse, you got to apply it across the board type of thing. Big one for me is editing issues. A lot of these thicker books are not getting the story started within the same amount of pages or word count as other debut authors in particular, but other authors can write an entire book in. And to me, that's really, really boring. And lastly, it feels, this may not be true, but it feels like these big books are being pushed to the publishers and the agents by other big name authors who happen to be in the author's, friendship circle or in their writing groups. And that's how networking works. At the same time, it feels like they aren't getting enough feedback from the average reader, and they're not getting enough editing, because you have these big name authors who have sold a lot of books going, this book is really, really, really great. Or, they had this really, really great idea. So, and then the execution kind of gets boring, and you're not going to get as many readers as you could otherwise when sales is the goal. Anyway, I do hope that this didn't precisely sound like sour grapes, because it's really not. I really feel that these are some good reasons to start, putting some of these books on a diet, I guess. Anyway, thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. Bless, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.